Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Cooper Thomas, and I'm a content specialist and cartographer on the Story Maps team at Esri, and I'm here today with Owen Evans. If you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Owen. I'm a product engineer on the Story Maps team. We're both based in our DC R&D center.
And we're here to tell you a little bit about Story Maps. Thanks so much for coming out. Really excited to see all you in the crowd out there. Thanks for sticking it out till the end of the afternoon. I imagine a lot of you are probably tired. I am. But hopefully we can keep this pretty fun and light, and you'll come out of this with some new skills and ideas. Hit it. So Story Maps are simple web applications in ArcGIS Online. They combine interactive maps and 3D scenes, which are hosted in ArcGIS Online, with multimedia content like photos or videos or even audio, which can be either hosted in ArcGIS Online as well or pulled in from external sources like YouTube or Vimeo, and narrative text, which provides a little bit of sort of supplementary commentary. And story maps are intended to tell stories about the world. They're about harnessing the narrative capability of maps to enrich the data and to really engage users and shed light on insights buried in the data. And these can range in scale and scope really from sort of microscopic stories focusing on maybe an individual building or like a walking tour of a museum, to stories about the whole planet, or even stories about other planets or star maps and so forth. And we've seen all kinds of examples of really incredible story maps. The apps themselves are all responsive, and so they should work well on a variety of different screen sizes and devices. Of course, they'll work best on a desktop computer, but you can also use them on a mobile phone, on a tablet, and we think it's important that they work well across all devices, and so that's kind of a top priority for us. And importantly, they also incorporate these interactive WYSIWYG builders in ArcGIS Online. So in order to create a story map, you don't actually need to write a line of code. You basically just open a web application in ArcGIS Online, and then you can just begin pulling in content and typing in text and so forth. And Owen's going to give you a little demo of that a little bit later on. By default, story maps are hosted in ArcGIS Online, just like a web app builder app or a web map. They just live in your content. It's really easy to find and sort them and manage them right in ArcGIS Online. That said, the story maps themselves are also open source, and so you can download the source code from GitHub or from our website, dig around a little bit, tinker with the story maps, implement customizations, ranging from small cosmetic tweaks to radical changes to the functionality. That's all supported by the applications, and that's something that we like to see our users experimenting with as well. There are a number of different story map templates or apps, all of which are optimized to serve different purposes, to tell different kinds of stories. So for instance, we have story map templates for providing a tour of a set of places, maybe a walking tour, or maybe it's just a bunch of points of interest in a city. We also have story map templates that are designed for really rich multimedia narrative experiences, sort of scroll-driven, scrolly-telling stories, if you will. We also have story maps that are a little bit simpler, and they just aim to present a series of related maps or images. And we even have an app that allows you to solicit submissions from the public to populate a map with, or an app with sites of interest to your user community. Just to provide a few examples of the different story map apps. This first one that I'm going to show you is the Cascade Template. Some of you may have seen some of these apps already over the past few days. And Cascade is one of our newest apps, and so it looks really nice and behaves well across all devices, assuming it loads. While that's loading, I'm going to jump over to Map Journal, which is also one of our most popular applications. This features a side panel here that scrolls, and as you scroll through the side panel, this main stage area over here updates. Again, all the content here is configured by an author in an interactive builder. And this main stage over here can show maps. It could also show a video. It could show an image. It could even show an embedded web page from from elsewhere in your organization or elsewhere on the web. This one's called Map Series. It just presents a series of related maps or graphics or other multimedia content organized under these tab headers across the top of the application. So I can just click through these and see a different view. Again, the author has provided a little bit of supplementary contextualizing text over here that basically provides a description of what the viewer is seeing over here in the main stage. And as I mentioned earlier, you're not limited just to content from Arcgis Online to include in your story map. You can actually pull in content from elsewhere on the web. In this case, the author has embedded one kind of story map, a story map journal, within another kind of story map, a story map series. So these tabs along the top are part of the story map series. And then the side panel here corresponds to the story map journal that's been embedded directly in that application. In the next Arcgis Online release, we're also going to debut a new layout for Map Tour, which has historically been our most popular app, but it's also our oldest and is beginning to look a little bit long in the tooth. So what you're seeing here is the new refreshed layout for Map Tour. It presents sort of a linear tour of places. In this case, it's a tour of exciting sites here in Palm Springs. But this essentially just allows you to click through those places sequentially, or if you want, you can jump to different places using the interactive map up here. The next one I'm going to show you is Crowdsource. This is the one that allows you to solicit submissions from the public. This particular one was produced by ILCP, which is a conservation photography organization. They essentially asked their user community to submit some of their favorite photos from around the world. It takes advantage of clustering, so as you zoom in, the gallery over here filters to only show the items that are within the map extent, and these clusters disaggregate as you zoom in closer and closer, and I can click on any of these entries in the gallery to see the full image and description. This particular template is called Shortlist. It's similar to Crowdsource, except it doesn't have that crowd submission capability enabled. It just presents sort of a non-linear collection of places here. I'm not sure why these pop-ups aren't appearing. And this Cascade is still not loading, so we'll try that again.
Did your Wi-Fi connection drop?
Nope. This little application that I showed you at the very beginning is also a Cascade, and it gives you a bit of a sense for the basic layout and structure of the template. It should be familiar for those of you that have spent time on the New York Times or on the Washington Post websites looking through some of their multimedia interactives there. There are these narrative sections here which can contain text or visual content that you just scroll through, and then there are these immersive sections where the background locks into place and you have these floating captions that appear over the top. I really wish I could show you this example here.
I'm going to show one too.
But yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Owen, and he's going to dive in a little bit deeper to some of those apps.
You guys hear me okay? Okay, great. I'm going to show you how to build a story map. So I'll give you a little demonstration of one of our builders. So this is the Cascade story map that Cooper was just showing you. So it's sort of one of our scrolly telling type formats. So as I scroll through, I get images and media that are presented to me. And you can see in this type of section, which we call a narrative section, all of that content is scrolling as I move through the story. And then I'll get to another type of section here, which we call our immersive section, which is when the media locks into place. And then we're really having some network issues here. Let's try again. There we go. So now you can see that map locks into place in the background, and then the story continues in these little caption panels that scroll across the screen. So this is just a little story about hockey. I've got a couple of images about hockey. I've got a little bit about the NHL here and some early teams and that sort of thing. And you can see as I get to each one of these new caption panels, things are happening in the background in that map. Something's happening. A layer turns on or off, a pop-up appears, the map might zoom to another location. So as the author, you can orchestrate your story using the builders so that the reader just has to scroll through the story to experience it. And I'll show you how the author would do that in a minute. And then this story just ends with another map showing all of the teams of the NHL, and then there's a little video from YouTube. So you can see you can put all sorts of different content in a story. And then it ends with a credit section where I can cite my sources or give credit to whoever was involved in creating the story. So let's take a look at how to build that story. So there's a couple different ways to create story maps. You can go to your Arcgis Online account and create them from your content page. You can also, if you're starting out, I recommend going to the Story Maps website and go over to the apps page. And Cooper showed this a few minutes ago. There's a couple of, all of our apps are described here. And if you're starting out, a great place to go is to this Create Story button at the top. It'll give you a list of all of the apps, and you can kind of hover over them and get a little one-sentence description. And if you're still not sure which one to pick, you can go to Ask the Pros, and we'll lead you through a series of questions that will help you arrive at the right type of story for your idea or your topic. So for example, let's say I want to tell a story about a set of places, and I would like to show photos for each location. I don't want to crowdsource them, I want to upload them myself, and they're not organized into categories. I would be recommended the Map Tour application to use for my story. So that's a nice way to go. Today, I'm going to create a Cascade story, so I can just go back to this other view and just click Cascade, and that will launch the builder. So I'll enter the title of my story. And then I'll start to add some media to my story. There's a couple different ways that I can get photos or media into my story, one of which is just to sort of drag them in from my desktop or from my computer. So I've got a couple of photos here. I've got that nice photo of people playing pond hockey. So I'm going to drag that in, and that will upload that image into the story map. And it'll optimize it. So if I've got like a big 10 megabyte image, I want this to perform well on the web. So the builder's going to optimize that photo for you and make it appear very quickly when you load your story. And we'll do that for any images that you upload to your story. Sure.
Maybe before you had to upload everything to Flickr.
Yes. Yeah, so all of our story maps provide the ability to upload your images to the story now. When we release the apps, you're right, you had to post your photos on Flickr or another web server. But that's not the case anymore. Yep. I'm not sure why we're really having some network issues here today, so I apologize for that. I'm just going to paste some text in here. That's not a feature of the builder. The builder doesn't write your story for you. I've actually just got some text that I'm pasting in here, so maybe we'll add that in next release, but that's not there today. And I'm going to connect to another service here. We've integrated with a website called Unsplash, which has a lot of great images, and hopefully my internet connection will cooperate here. If not, I've got the image locally. Yep, there we go. So I had that picture of those old skates in my other story, so I'm going to grab that. So there's a lot of images out on the web. So if you just need a stock image, maybe you don't have an image exactly that you want, you can connect to these other services. You can also search Flickr and other sources as well. So I'll just continue on putting some additional text in the story. And cascades can be long or short, but no matter what the length, you might want to separate them into sections. So we've got some other elements in here that you can add, like a title section, which is a way to separate your story into parts, so that people can, you can have an organizational structure to your story. So I had a section about the original 6 hockey teams. And I could go out and I could find another photo. I'm just going to grab one here from Unsplash to add. And then I'm going to add another narrative section after this. And I could continue this, continue on adding sections. And I'm going to add one of those immersive sections now so I can show you how to orchestrate how a map looks through a different section. So in this case, instead of adding an image, I'm going to go to my ArcGIS tab and go over to my content. And I've got that map that I showed you before with where those hockey teams were located. And I'll bring that in. And I'll add some text to that panel. And I'll add a title up here. And I've got different settings where I can choose the background and the text color for my titles and that sort of thing. And so that's all available throughout the builder. And now in this case, I want to continue this immersive section with different views of this map. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this view that I just added, but change the layers that appear in this second view. So I've got my layer list up here in the top right, so I'll just turn off all of those early teams, and I'll turn on my original 6 teams. So what actually happened in the 20s, the NHL had 10 teams, and then when it went through the Great Depression, a lot of those teams folded. And then in the early 40s, when the NHL, they had 6 teams left, that's when they called it the original 6, and that was sort of the entry to the modern era of the league. So that's sort of what's kind of the point to my story here. So now I've added some additional text to this panel. Actually, I added the same one. Let me delete that. There we go. That's the panel that I want. And then I'm going to add one more panel. I'm not going to do all the ones that I had in my sample story, but because I think you're getting the idea. But what I do want to do here is I want to zoom in and just show a little bit more about one of the franchises. Just showing that you can actually zoom into different locations with your story map. So I'm going to zoom into New York for this last view here. And again, I apologize for the slow internet. And I'll just add some text to my panel there. And in this case, I've got a lot more features on the left side of my map, so I'll just use my settings to move my panel over to the right for this section. So really easy to create a story using this builder and enter my content. So now I'll just save this one, and I can preview my story, and here's the story that I just built. So that was about 5 or 6 minutes, kind of putting all that content in there, setting up my, my immersive section, configuring my map views, and now I've got a little story, right? So all the builders are a little bit different because you're building different types of stories. But this is one example of what the Cascade builder looks like. Some of the other things I wanted to show everybody was some examples of customizing story maps. As Cooper said, story maps are open source, so you can go to GitHub and download the code and host it on your own web server, and also modify that code if you like. So if you want to see some examples of this, you can go to our gallery, which is on our website. There's just a tab called Gallery. If you scroll down to the side, if you click Customized under Format, all the stories that you see here will have some type of customization. So you can get an idea of what other people are doing with customizing story maps. And I've picked a few to just show you today. This one is the story map series bulleted layout. And I think Cooper showed one of these before. What this person, or the folks that have customized this story have done is they've added another header bar across the top with their own navigation leading back to their own website. And they've also taken the bullets, and instead of having numbers in those bullets, they've added their own custom labels and also custom colors to those bullets as well. They did a couple of other things as well that are custom. They've got a feedback link up here in the header. So they've added a library that allows them to collect someone's name, email, address, and comments, and then they can collect that feedback based on the story map. So that's something custom that they did. And they also added some additional controls down on the bottom that allows the readers of the story to quickly navigate between Alaska, Hawaii, and the continental US. So those are some simple little customizations that they wanted to do for this particular story. Here's a story that was released by our team. This is a story about the US-Mexican border. And this story obviously is in English, but it's also available in Spanish. So in this story, we've put in a language switcher on the homepage, or on the cover. So when you click that, we'll load an alternate version of the story that's translated into Spanish. Right? So a lot of our customers are dealing with stories in multiple languages. So this is a nice way to kind of link those two stories together. And there's several other ways. We actually have a blog post about doing story maps in multiple languages if you're interested as well. And then the last example I'll show is another story that we released on our team. This one's got a nice index map. This is a story map journal. And the typical way to navigate a story map journal is to sort of use the arrows or scroll through the sections, or to use the dot navigation on the side here. But this story was done by the UN, and it's about a lot of sites around the world that they're preserving. So there's an index map at the top, because each one of these sections corresponds to a place on the globe. So the index map is actually another way to navigate through the story. So you simply just click on the location in the index map, and you'll be navigated to that section of the story. So these customizations and a lot more are actually documented on our developers blog, which is the Story Map Developers Corner. So you can just Google Story Map Developers Corner and you can find it, or you can go to the resources page of our website. And you can scroll down here and you can see a lot of different articles that we've had here. So here's an article about using the map in Map Journal as a navigation tool, or changing the color of the Cascade header. And there's a lot of other articles here that help you figure out how to do customizations, and there's sample code here and other help that will help you understand the process of hosting your own story map and customizing your own story map. So with that, we'd be happy to take some questions, and we appreciate you coming today. We're going to be over in the, we're on the far end of the showcase this year, so you can come over and stop by and talk to us if you want to know anything more about story maps, talk a little bit more about customizing them, or any other topics related to story maps. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
Can you pull images that have been attached to other records into story map now?
Like a feature record? So not as an attachment. If you're making a map tour, you would be able to use your feature attachments. But for other story maps, you'll have to just download that, and you can upload it directly into the builder. Or, like we talked about, you can post those to Flickr or another web server as well. But we recommend dragging them into the map, the story map.
Is there a limit now on numbers of images that can be attached to story map?
Well, there's a limit to the number of points you can have in a map tour. But there's no limit in the number of photos you can have in a story map. Like the narrative stories that we showed, like Journal and Series and Cascade. It's just, you're just getting charged credits for the storage of the images, but it's like, pennies per gigabyte. It's, very inexpensive. So, but there is a storage charge for those images as you upload them. Any other questions? Yes?
If you create a story map on one organization's site, can you transfer that to a different organization with the photos and data about that area?
So the question was, if you create a story map in one organization, can you transfer it to another organization? You can't today. If you don't upload your images, if you have your images stored in another place, we've got a process. Actually, there's an article on the developers corner with the way to do that. But the uploaded photos are not transferred over today. And you'd have to copy your maps over and your data over independently as well if you wanted those to exist in the other organization as well. But I have documented that process on the developers corner if you're interested in going through that. Sure. Anything else? All right, great. Thanks very much for coming today, and feel free to stop by and talk to us some more at the booth.
Thank you.